Hey everybody, welcome back to Tavern Talks. I am your humble host this evening, and tonight we have another guest. Give me 1 second because it looks like my properties are off. Let me make sure those are headphones. Okay, it should be working. For some reason, it sounded like we were picking up a strange feed. But yeah, our guest this evening is Tom Nelson over at Deck of Player Safety. He seems to have come up with the key to how to make things easier when it comes to safety tools. And I'm looking forward to talking to him about this because for me as a game master and for the years that I've been playing, I didn't even know what safety tools were until I started streaming. Let's be honest here. Back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, safety tools was really not a thing, but I think part of that reason is because of the fact that you were playing with your friends usually about 90% of the time. I didn't even find out that conventions were a thing until just a few years ago when it came to the fact that I found out what Gen Con was. And then finding out it's 70,000 people, I was wondering what rock I was living under. But tonight I'm going to have Tom kind of give us just this little elevator speech to kick this off. And then we'll have a few normal questions that we have every week. And then we'll just kind of let the guests do their thing and see where things go.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks, James, for having me on. It was great running into you and meeting you at GaryCon. Hope I didn't just blow your eardrum out there.
There we go. No, I was wondering why it was coming through both my headphones and my speaker at the same time, which is what I was confused about at the beginning.
I'm
So I don't know what
everywhere.
happened, but we're good now.
We're good now. All right. But yeah, running into you at GaryCon was really fortunate, and I appreciate you, allowing me to come on to your show and talk about something I've been talking about pretty nonstop to anybody in the TTRG or RPG space for the past, I don't know, 18 months or so, which is the deck of player safety. In short, the elevator pitch, as you put it, is that the deck is essentially a session zero, a 3 minute session zero. That's what I call it. It's a session zero for when you don't have time for a session zero. So the inspiration, just to kind of start with that, came from me running convention games and organized play at my local game store. And just, traditionally I had started using the X card because some sort of tool was starting to become the norm in a lot of organized play. And I just found that the last time the X card was played, I thought, that person, now that I rewound this scene, they were really uncomfortable for a while leading up to having the courage to play the X card in front of strangers.
Mm.
I just thought there's got to be something better out there, a better way to do this. Um, so, what the deck of player safety is, in short, it is a deck of casino cards, very common, casino familiar cards. It's got 32 different, what I call hot button topics, and I know they're not going to really come up on the screen, but things like terminal illness, fire, yelling and shouting, torture, human trafficking, combat against domestic or wild animals, harm to domestic animals, fear of heights, sexual innuendo, and flirting, and all kinds of other topics that happen frequently in convention type setting, or lower level play perhaps. Under the assumption that you're running, usually a PG-13 type game anyway. So, more extreme topics are left out with that in mind. But the way the deck works and the problem I found that it solves are, let me start with that first. The problems it solves are one, it's anonymous. So you sit down at a table with strangers, who wants to reveal whatever makes them uncomfortable, for a 4 hour game with people you don't know. And the mechanic behind it allows the process to be anonymous for everybody at the table, even the GM. So the GM doesn't know anything about the individuals playing, and vice versa. So additionally, it's fast. Running a convention game, you are always pressed for time. You have 4 hours. So you can't take up a lot of time with checklists or like long discussions. So the idea I had that in mind in the design process was this has got to be quick, and that's why I call it a 3 minute session zero. And most importantly, it works at heading off problems before they happen. That's the goal. The X card, like I said, when I saw that last time it was played, it was I like to get really gory in description, and that person, I went too far and they X carded, and then I realized, okay, they went through a lot of discomfort to get to that point. And frankly, my very unscientific opinion is probably 90 to 95% of people wouldn't even play the X card. They just would walk away with the bad feelings
Mm-hmm.
and not, raise their hand or admit anything in front of a group of strangers
Mm.
that they were not having a good time. They don't want to disrupt play and things like that. So those are the key points on how the deck of safety solves that problem. It's anonymous for everybody. It's very fast and it heads problems off at the start versus after they happen. So the way that works, again, coming back to the fact that you got very common hot button topics in here, the, after explaining that you are using this safety tool to your players, you would basically just hand the deck to the first player. They would skim the deck to look for any topics that they don't want in the session, and they would just select that card. So they'll pick that card. They can pick multiple cards. If they don't want multiple, there's multiple things they don't want in their game session. But the key to the anonymity is that there are several, about a dozen or so, if I can make them show, anything goes cards. So the anything goes card is what you would pull if, you know what, I looked through the whole deck, I'm good with all of it. So I would submit an anything goes card. So after the deck makes its rounds, to all the players, and this usually happens during setup of the game or right before you're about to kick off the game.
Right.
The GM would pick up all the cards without looking at them, which is key. So now the GM doesn't know who turned in what either, and even most like pre-session checklists, the GM knows who's sending what in most cases. But you would just, then pick up the cards and you would say, okay, folks, in this game, we're not going to have any drowning and suffocation, no flirting, no children in distress, and then we got two more anything goes cards. So with those rules in mind, let's play. So it really, after people have been exposed to it once, a GM or the players, it really is like a 2-minute exercise at the start of your game. And now everybody is on the same page. And that's really an important step, is making sure you review the topics with the players so that everyone's on the same page. It creates an atmosphere where people can relax a little bit because you just kind of unofficially had this discussion about, what you're comfortable with and what you're not. And you haven't had to, raise your hand or step into the spotlight.
Right. And it's super quick too, it seems. Like,
Yeah.
like you said, 2 to 3 minutes, you pass around these cards. And you make sure, of course, like you said, is that you let those people grab those anything goes cards, because
Yeah.
then there is no option. If everybody was just grabbing the cards they just thought were wrong, then you can pull out kind of like, oh, okay, Johnny seems to pull 6 cards. This person pulled 2 cards. It's one of these two that did it, but you don't
Yeah.
have to worry about that this time, which is great. I love that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I
So
think,
it's really as simple as that.
yeah,
And the feedback I had when I play tested this at my local game store really was just more positive than I expected. My home gaming groups are kind of probably sick of hearing me talk about it because we play, weekly, bi-weekly, sometimes monthly, depending on the group. But they were a big help in helping, devise the mechanic, fine tune the topics, things like that. But once I saw the response from players about having a voice anonymously, even I had people come up and say, you know what, I turned in afterwards, like I put in anything goes, but I really appreciate you doing that, like giving us a chance to express ourselves. That I knew I had to do something with it, so with that in mind, I kickstarted it in May of last year with a very modest, goal in mind, and just ran with it from there. And
yeah,
it's been really gaining a lot of traction.
that's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, we're going to talk about that tonight as well. But before we do that, because this is something I love to do, and it kind of brings us to the understanding of where you're coming from with a lot of this, is I ask all of my guests 3 questions. If you watch any of our shows, first 3 questions I ask is, the first one, of course, is how long have you been playing TTRPGs?
So as of this year, I am the same age as D&D. I turned 50 back in April.
Awesome.
And I am kind of that quintessential, I don't know, I was 8, 9, or 10. My brother had the books to start. He's older. He may be here to antagonize me. I'm not sure. But my memory is he had the books somehow. I don't even know how he got them, but he had the books, and I would just fawn over them. I would just take them. I would go I can remember being in our dining room with this like book light that I just pretended was a candle and just read in the dark, just with that light, just reading the content. And that really just launched me on the fantasy track. Like I loved fantasy after that. And then then the Lord of the Rings and everything else that follows. So I started with basic, and Frank, I found some of my old characters because you didn't have character sheets, you had lined paper, and that feeling that came back instantly of like, oh man, I can just remember how I felt drawing these characters up because you had to draw your lines and what it was just
Yeah.
really a fun nostalgic feeling. But then, of course, moved into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, played with a lot of middle school kids. We were the Stranger Things kids in that regard. And through high school, had a really good group of friends playing through high school. But after first edition and going away to college, so I went to Georgia Tech. I studied engineering.
Hmm.
I wanted to distance myself as far as I could from being a nerd at an engineering school. So basically dropped D&D at that point. Never took
Right.
it up again. Never attended a convention prior to that, or at I was at that time,
Right.
and it wasn't until fourth edition came out,
Oh
and
wow.
some of my high school buddies, I had moved back to Atlanta. I'd moved away for a little bit, came back to Atlanta, and they're like, "Hey, we're playing, D&D Minis was the first thing, the board game version." And they're like, "Fourth edition's out. Why don't we just try it? Let's try it." And I laughed and laughed and laughed. I was like, "Guys, this is just too dorky. We can't do
We
this.
can't do
Come on."
this again. We did this.
Yeah,
We
this
did
is
this
no.
20
We're
years ago.
we're
We can't
past
do it
this.
now.
And now they make fun of. They remind me all the time about that and how I am now the nerd who basically lives TTRPGs in my
Yeah.
spare time. Run games all the time. I've got I buy all the paraphernalia. I got the game room. I've got, the lifestyle stuff. I've got the tattoo. I've got my DM chalice that
Like
that
that. Yeah,
gives
I
me a
got my
workout when I get
you know.
to. There you go.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a special one, right? Um, so yeah, with fourth edition, hey, that group, fourth edition may not have been for everybody. Has a lot of, there's a lot of debate. It got us around the table, and we had so much fun playing it. And on top of it, that group was pretty tactical as it was. So a tactical version of the game, we loved it. We had a great time
And that
playing
was the
it.
thing, I think, is fourth edition. And I didn't actually play fourth. Fourth was that one weird moment when I just didn't play at all. And it wasn't fourth's problem, it was just timing.
Yeah.
Um, I went from 3 and 3.5 from high school and college, and then joined the military, and then just life hit, and I didn't pick it back up until fifth. Um, but yeah, it was those moments, right? And this strange feeling of that nostalgia coming back to that lifestyle that you grew up as a child.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but
It's thank you for your service, by the way.
oh, no worries.
Appreciate that.
Um,
Yeah.
did my time. I'm glad I'm out.
Yeah.
and but those moments are one of the most memorable moments I've ever had in Dungeons and Dragons outside of high school. Was either doing it in areas you probably shouldn't have been playing anything in, or when everything was grim and dark. That was what was kind of keeping everybody grounded.
Right.
And it's funny to say that because I've talked to people from all aspects of the military, and they'll all tell you that pretty much that same thing is it's like, yeah, when there's nothing else to do or everything else is not the best idea, then that's when the game comes out. But it's also a really easy way to connect with people, especially in areas that you don't have anybody else.
Yeah.
Remote tours, deployments, TDYs, things like that, where it's just you and other military members.
Right.
So
And it doesn't take a lot to play it.
no, it doesn't.
You can go as little or as complicated as you want.
Yeah, ours
Great.
are.
And actually, that reminds me. So our fourth edition DM, who
Yeah,
got us, back in, it was a first edition Air Force, MP guarding nukes, and he said they sat around playing D&D all the time.
yeah, because
And
all you need is a piece of paper and a dice. You're
yeah,
done.
yeah, and hopefully nothing's going to happen with the nuclear bombs.
Yeah,
So
right.
it was like you got time to kill in that regard. So yeah, it was, and he was a great DM and really got us all around the table. And it was to your point, like it was a release, just like so many other forms of entertainment.
Hmm.
I can literally remember with that group, it's like some of the members being like, guys, it's been one of those weeks. I need some D&D, like Friday night.
I
And
need
I was
some
just still
D&D.
thinking we're in high school because in high school it was like we're staying up all night, we're gonna go till dawn, and we'd crack like at 3.
Yeah,
But that group still was like start at 7 p.m. and just go till we were done. And it was like a lot of times 2 o'clock in the
yeah.
morning, 3 o'clock, and be like, all right, everybody out. We're just dead tired.
Yeah, I think I can only do about 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours nowadays, and then I'm just like,
Yeah.
but for me, it's very draining because of we're diving at the level that we play nowadays, where it's
Mm,
very emotional, it's very dramatic at times. That
mm,
can be draining, like mentally draining.
right.
I know days I'll come off of a game, especially if I'm running one for a while. It takes me 30, 40, 50 minutes to slow down my brain to go to sleep. And when you got to be up
Yeah,
early in the morning, you're like, crap,
I
this is
know.
not going to
Start,
work.
you start thinking of the next session. But I know what you
Yeah.
mean. I mean, not that long ago, I almost was in tears just from the role play with the player.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in my own head. It was, the things we were talking about and where I was going, I was like, all right, I got to dial this back a little bit because it was just getting real.
Right.
And so yeah, but that's, there are a million different tables, a million different ways to play,
Agreed.
and every game is yours, and you can make the most of it. And however, it's fun for you, which I
Yep.
love. It's such a good thing about the game.
And I love that you mentioned it with fourth edition because a lot of people really give a lot of flack with fourth edition.
Mhm.
And for me, that seems to be a problem because I hear it constantly. And never playing fourth edition, I don't know that experience difference, but from what I've
Yeah.
heard is it's not that bad. It's actually just different. And what they were doing is
Yeah.
they were trying to model to a different audience
Mhm.
at the time, and that's what they did because they were trying to start, like you said, the minis game and the very tactile or tactical. But
Yeah.
funny enough, if we want to go into the history of it, that's where this all came from.
Of
So
course.
tactical is
Yeah.
not really that far off from what the original plan was for Dungeons and Dragons. What it's evolved to is absolutely incredible and the
Oh,
difference.
it's unreal. I
But
mean, the who would have imagined, that D&D would be, and as a result,
yeah,
all these other
oh
TTRPGs
yeah,
are just going gangbusters and having so much opportunity for success. I mean, my one opinion, I mean, we can get into WotC, D&D, and D, and
yeah,
all the other games, companies versus game,
yeah,
as opposed to games and things like that, the game itself. It's like I kind of feel like everybody should be rooting for Dungeons and Dragons because it will be the gateway game. And
and
it
it will
is
be the
what's going to
game
it
that will
allows all these other
always.
games to flourish. It allows Shadow Dark. It allows all the
Mm,
OSR stuff. It's without that tide rising, and I know Michael used that expression
yeah,
last interview. And I know he's in chat, so
yeah. No, Mike's in there.
yeah,
Mike
it's
got us to start a new initiative this year too, which is awesome. So we'll talk about that at
good.
the end.
Bryce, a great dude,
Yeah,
and I'll get into that later. But but in any case, that with D&D's success, whether you like the game or the company or not,
yeah,
allows all these other games to be successful
correct.
because it is the gateway that 98% of players are going to come in by
Yep.
because it's a brand. It's one of the top brands in the world.
Yeah.
It's just it doesn't make a lot of money being a top brand because of the nature of what it is. But I think.
Right. Well,
So,
and it's paper
but yeah, I mean,
product.
fourth edition, we looked at it as like it got us around the table and we had a great time.
Yeah.
Like, rules are just rules. Like, okay, I mean,
Yeah.
have fun with your game. Again, yeah, I think getting too hung up on it
Yeah.
is missing the goal of playing a game in a way.
Right. Um, I don't bash any system really ever, especially on
No.
this show. This show is supposed to be very positive. I
Mm,
will say one thing though that's really confusing me about the new 2024 edition, and that is there's no character sheets. That's really confusing to me, because it kind of takes us away from that pen and paper feel of what Dungeons and Dragons originally was, and it doesn't allow me now to, unless I buy it from them, which we all know in the
mm.
world of the internet that I will have a free version within about 2 days, but that's
Yep.
besides the point.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
I don't know who, where, when it will come, but it'll happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's the funny thing because a lot of times we want to play Dungeons and Dragons through the other opportunities where many people want to go back to the original way of playing it with pen and paper at a table with their friends in a very safe location. And
Right.
that to me is great. And I think that is the one thing that they can never really take away, and that's going to be
Absolutely.
the best part about it. No
Yeah.
matter how the rules change, how the game changes, things like
Right.
that, the idea of everybody getting around the table is never going to change.
I do think just to kind of, I mean, again, not to, if you want to, we can go down the company side of
No,
things.
no,
I
no, we're
mean,
not going to go down that company side of
yeah, at the
things.
end of the day, Wizards is a company
Yeah,
who, as big as they are, has to look at, what's their 10-year horizon. The focus, yeah, you want to keep your current customers, but they got to be looking at who's our customer 10 years from now and
right.
how are we preparing for that? And the future will be more digital. It's just, I mean, that's the way they're going to go. So,
Agreed.
and I think that's why there's no character sheet because you want a character, go to D&D Beyond.
Yeah,
That's just my unofficial, like that's my
right.
interpretation of the lack of a character sheet. Go to our platform and use it. And the beauty of this industry and this type of game is you can still forever sit around the table and play fifth edition 2014
Yep.
where all the tools are there and
Yeah,
they're never going to go
they're
away.
never going to go away. That's what paper copies are.
Yeah.
That's what paper's for, right? Is it doesn't go
Yeah.
away.
And at the
Um,
same time, root for the success of the digital platform because that is what will allow D&D to keep thriving into the years to come with
right.
new players. You don't have to play with them,
Yeah.
but more players is better for the industry overall.
Understood. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So you've answered the
Mhm.
first two questions. The first one was, well, actually, no, you've answered the first
I got,
question.
I know. I told you I'd talk a lot.
You kind of answered the second question without knowing you answered it. The second
Okay.
question is how did you get involved in tabletop RPGs? But I think the better question is what sparked your interest in tabletop RPGs as a child? Because I think that's the bigger question that
Yeah.
people need to understand are curious about. Because I could say, yeah, my brother brought it to me or my friends brought it here, but what actually got you interested?
Yeah. I mean, I would have to say it's probably the shitty art in the monster manual.
Okay,
And yet, I mean, it really like that because there were things you'd never seen before,
right,
even though it was just pen art and very
yeah,
simple depictions of it.
hmm,
It was the idea of in my mind I can picture a torch lit castle
yeah,
hallway or a cavern. I could not picture a beholder or
right,
a bugbear or a hobgoblin or even
yeah,
a goblin at the time. I mean,
yeah,
Tolkien wrote about them, but I didn't really have a good look at
right,
what they would look like or an image of what they'd look like. So I really think it was visualizing this whole side that I just couldn't imagine myself. Because a lot of it was, brand new, like it didn't exist before. Just
right,
D&D created it, right?
yeah,
Um, and I think that because I was already willing to like walk down dark corridors and like adding that to it and even being able to kind of imagine doing it in real life in a way, I
yeah,
mean, as an 8-year-old kid or 10-year-old kid, like, all right, we're gonna creep around in the dark and imagine what's around the corner, that type of thing to get started. I think that's really what just hooked me on it.
right. I've been really playing hard into this. The interview that Deborah Wall did with the dude from Punisher, and the
Uh,
idea of how she instantly got him into playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it's such a neat concept of just starting,
mhm.
because nowadays there's so much that we think we want to make it so complicated, and we want to make this difficult for people, but we don't at the same time.
Mhm.
But we try to without trying to. Where if you're just
Yeah.
like, hey, this is where you're at, what do you do next? And people don't realize that it's that easy. And it's always fun because for me as a game master, that's when I watch the spark click in the back of their head and they go, I can do anything. Like anything.
Yeah.
And then you have to watch out for the goblin that appears after that, because then you're like, oh, what
Mhm.
are they going to do now that they understand that they have no boundaries, unlike a video game where there are actual parameters to a game system. Um,
Right.
this is just this is storytelling.
Yeah, it is.
This is the reason why stories that we've told for many many years that have now become myths and legends have grown to the massive exaggeration that potentially these could have become because of the fact that we're retelling these stories over and over and over again and making them just a little bit more fantastical, a little bit
Yeah.
more different,
Yeah.
mysterious.
And the way that has permeated through, pop culture in general, even today. Like my wife,
Hmm.
she's like, "Okay, nerd, go play your D&D." She's not a gamer in this way. Oh, she couldn't care less.
Yeah.
But then she'll like let's watch The Witcher. I want to watch that. Let's have another watch through, and I'll be like, this is D&D, right? I mean,
Right.
this is exactly D&D. I mean, that's what the show is. Or just pick any type of things like, that's pretty much D&D. Supernatural, it's a different form of D&D, but pretty much D&D.
Yeah, it's the new. What's the new one? Mike, you got flagged.
What's that?
Mike was
Oh,
talking to somebody. He used to work, and my bot flagged it. I said, "Man, it's all right. We'll be okay with that one." This is an over 18 channel, so it's all right.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the Monsters of the Week. I mean, it's very
Oh,
similar
yeah.
to The Witcher and Angel and Buffy the
Yep.
Vampire Slayer and all these other ones that you're used to watching in the 90s and 80s and
Mhm.
probably before that. That's as far as I can go back.
Right.
So
But yeah, coming back to it, I think that's what it was. Just, letting your imagination run wild
I love
because
that.
it really, created a framework for that, I
Yeah.
think.
I guess the final question is then when did you decide to pick up the mantle? When did you say I'm done being a player and I want to be a game master?
Yeah, good question. So that first happened with a dot matrix printer, so that's going back a ways. I mean, when I was in, God, that was I've lived a lot of places, so I always got to think, where was I living at the time? That's how I
Yeah.
pick an age. I was in New York before Georgia at the time, and yeah, I'm pretty sure that's when I wrote. I think I typed. It wasn't dot matrix. I typed it and then
Okay.
put it in the printer. Yeah, it was a typewriter, I think. Anyway, at like 12 years old, I wrote my own module in a
Nice.
very
Yep.
classic first edition version called The Shrine of the Unknown Truth, which is again just a very generic, tells you nothing name, um, typical of the time. And I typed that, and it was a big shrine with a lot of unknown truths. But it was from what I recall from first edition, because I haven't played first edition since then. I mean, since I was a
Mm,
kid. I should go back and just give Thaco another try. But
yeah.
I just remember, I even loved the tables. Like, oh, I gotta look on the table, see how complicated this is. I feel special. But yeah, I wrote it, and it was literally like you open a door. Hey, there's a Sandman. Next door, you fight that, kill the Sandman. Go to the next room. There's a Mind Flayer. Like it was just whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Whatever I thought was a cool
It's just
monster.
whack a mole.
Just this room has this. Like no story, no like
Yeah.
real purpose. And I did coming back to fourth edition. After I gave our DM a break, I was like, all right, that was when so I never let me back up. I never ran that in first edition. Moved to Georgia, didn't just never it never happened.
Right.
And uh and so fourth edition came around and I had, crossed the line. I was all in. I was like, yep, I'm into D&D now. And we gave our DM a break. I was like, I'm willing to run this. Let me run my 12-year-old module.
Oh my goodness. That had
So
to be so fun though.
I tweaked it a little bit to try and make some kind of story out of it, but it was still very like just almost
Yeah.
as written as a
Let's
12-year-old.
open the door and see what comes out type
And they
stuff.
tolerated me for sure. So I appreciate them doing that because that got me that said, yeah, I want to DM more. I just want
Mm,
to DM more. Unfortunately, we all had chances to DM. We all liked taking it up and giving
nice.
this break and whatnot. And then
That's
the
unknown. That's
way things turned
unusual.
out,
So,
yeah, it's helpful when you can take a break. But so the way things turned out, I moved away yet again. I moved to California for about 11 years. That group still played, ironically, because I would come back to Atlanta for like every 2 months or so because of my job. And it'd be like, all right, I'm in town. And I'd land at Atlanta's airport, drive to our session on Friday night, and we'd start playing. As soon as I got there,
yeah.
we go till 2 a.m. and then I'd, get on with my weekend and work week and stuff. And we still managed to play probably every 2 months because I had to come back every couple of months. So that worked for a while. And then I didn't have to come back anymore because of work. So long pauses went and we weren't playing online at all at that point. That was too early, at least for us for online.
Yep.
Um, and that group fizzled. We're still in touch, and we still get together. And one of the guys is my best friend, Michael. Another Mike Grady. But in any case, yeah. I mean, we still talk about another game. But listen, guys, if anybody you're listening, I will play. I am not DMing. I already DM too much. I got too much on my plate. Like I will show up as a player any day. You pick the night and the game system, I'll show up. But
Awesome.
so, um, but anyway, yeah. So after that point, so then fifth edition came out, and I was kind of on my own. I was in California. I had to find new DM
Yep.
or new RPG friends. Made a really great group of friends out there, and just decided I'm going to start running a game. Storm King's Thunder came out. It was the quintessential Giants, and sticking with the classic themes. I was like, this gets me going. I'm going to
Yeah.
run it, and I'm still running it again. Well, we did 3 years and didn't finish. I got a new group. We're yeah, I don't know, halfway is a rough estimate after 2 years because we just go off on the new stories in the middle of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But that really, at that point, I was like, I'm a better DM than a player because of attention span. I like being engaged all the time. And
Gosh.
frankly,
Yeah.
I was an engineer and I'm not a very good engineer. I mean, I got a degree, but I'm more of a salesperson than anything else, if you couldn't tell. But the where was I going with it now? Damn it, I forgot. But oh, I know the notion of like I didn't have any type of personal creative outlet before. I didn't do music. I didn't paint. I didn't, I had nothing creative. And the storytelling became my source of my outlet for creativity. And not just the storytelling. So that's part of it. But then also like 3D terrain and making stuff and minis and all the things that go with if you want it, RPGs. So it really did just become my creative outlet today, and I hope my goal is that like I can get old and stay pliable, keep my brain pliable because I'm
Yeah.
using my imagination all the time. I will
No.
say, anybody afraid to DM, last thing on that is the nice thing about GMing or DMing a game is anytime you want to be in it, you just go like, I'm going to go work on my game. Like, I got to go prep. As a player, you show up, you play for 2 to 4 to 6 hours, and you go home, and then you're done for more or less until the next session. But
Yep.
when you're running the game, it's like, I want to get in my world. I'm just going to go in and work on stuff.
Hmm.
And maybe it never sees the table, but I get to work on it and enjoy it just for my own sake.
Yeah. No, I can feel that tremendously. Um, and I can tell you that's a double-edged sword because I've done
Mhm.
that as a I'm going to use quotations on this, a professional game master. And the only reason I put it
Yeah.
as the fact that I got paid to do it. It's the only reason I
Nice.
call myself a professional. I call myself
Hey,
semi-professional.
pay to play is
Um,
professional.
but I will say, when you're running 5 games in 5 different worlds, your brain does no longer focus properly.
Yeah.
And I had to learn that very quickly because running games from GUI Cube, running games for Icewind Dale, running games in Horde of the Dragon Queen, running games in my own homebrew world, and it just all of a sudden I would get into a game and I'd be like, yeah, so and so shows up, and they're like, who? I was like, oh
Oop.
crap, wrong game. Let's spin this around and twist it around
Yeah.
because it just my brain
That'd be
would
tough.
not keep up with that many worlds. Some
Yeah.
people can do it. I can't. So I made
Yeah.
a rule that if I'm running a game on stream or if I'm running a game in my homebrew or my home world, that everything stays in that world because then
Yeah.
it allows me to prep multiple, but it also for some reason allows me to continue to expand that world better because I'm always there,
Yeah.
which I thought was definitely more of a use than for me to lose my mind and try to figure out how to do that without doing that. So there's
No,
that.
I think, like any job, streamlining efficiencies, that's how you make the job easier
Yeah.
and keep it enjoyable.
Hmm.
Because let's face it, you take a hobby and you make it a job, the fun can go away.
Oh yeah,
Um,
straight up.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, it absolutely can. So you got to keep it fun and be doing it. It's not, I mean, yeah, the money, I'm sure being paid. I've never been, done paid GM gigs, and I certainly wouldn't rule it out. If I had time to do it, I would. But actually, I'm gonna start charging my current players now that I think about it. No, just kidding. Um, but uh, but yeah, I think just keep it fun and then
Yep.
keep at it.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Well, let's see where are we at of time. Oh goodness.
I
So
know.
what I want to do though is because we had talked about this, and I want to show this off, and I want to have some fun. As an audience, you have the opportunity to participate because we figured this out at the last minute, and I think it's fun to that. Oh, cheers to that! Yes, please, cheers.
Yeah. Cheers to that.
There's our hydrate. Awesome. Yeah, I'm. That is going to be another thing we're working on streamlining is that when people put up little bits and things like that, things are going to pop up on the screen, and we're all going to have fun as we continue to build. This is our community channel and our community stream, because this is really what this is about. So what we're going to do is I'm going to transition over here to this one here. And what this allows us to do is we're going to check out Demiplane.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So just kind of leading into this, if I may. So when I kickstarted the project, the physical decks, I'm not an IT person. I don't do software. And I was like, I don't know how to do, I'm not gonna do that. I can do a physical deck of cards because guess what? A lot of companies make decks of cards. Very easy. And I've kept it in the US, which is nice. It keeps it flexible. Just keep it, American made with a really good quality.
Yeah.
But during the Kickstarter, it's probably day 3 or 4. I gotta, thank Teos Abadia. If you all don't know him, he's on the Mastering Dungeons podcast and YouTube stream with Sean Merwin. And Teos, I'd met at Game Hall Con, and he had started doing his Success in RPGs, which is about the industry. How do you do this for money? In whatever you're going to do in the RPG industry for money. And he has a series that's really good and informative about the business side of RPGs. But I even messaged them. I said, hey, I really like what you're doing. I didn't have the idea at the time. I was like, hey, maybe this will encourage me to stick my toes in the water. Like maybe write something for DM's Guild or something like that.
Right.
But after I came up with the idea, I just said, hey, I approached him and said, we met at Game Hall Con. I've got this idea. What do you think? And he's like, I love it. And was one of the first backers on Kickstarter and publicized it. So I can't thank him enough for giving it visibility on X. And then because of that, Adam Bradford, who had, was behind D&D Beyond, and then after, just prior to the sale, moved to Demiplane. So he's the brains behind the whole, online character build as we know it today, or at least, a couple of years ago. He's been gone for a couple of years. But anyway, Adam reached out to me and said, hey, I love the concept. The industry needs this. I want to do a digital version. And I said, we basically came to an agreement. I said, look, you can do it for as long as you don't charge for it. I'll let you do it for free.
That's awesome.
The online version is 100% free. It does not require a Demiplane account. You don't have to log in because, of course, then you lose anonymity. And it is system agnostic. So whether you use Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, or Discord, whatever you're using, you'll be able to see that right now because, like you said, we'll get a little interaction here.
Yeah.
All you do is you go to demiplane.com/DOPS, so Deck of Player Safety, frequently is DOPS for short. And as the GM, you would just start a session.
Yep, which we have it open right now.
Which you have right now, which is great. So yeah, you would start your session. This is as easy as it is. If you
So I'm just going to hit the link.
You copy the link and then paste it into whatever chat you're using. So in this case, we can paste it in the Twitch chat.
Yep,
and everybody who's watching right now can click that link and you will get all the cards and you can select whatever topics you want excluded from the game.
That's so cool.
So, and included, there is at the bottom, there's the anything goes card. Now, in the digital version, there's only one because you don't need multiples.
Multiple people, right.
Digital. And there's also a blank card for people to write in custom topics. Don't be a smartass right now. We are streaming.
We are live.
But anybody could put, because one of the things with 32 hot button topics on cards is that you can't cover everything.
Right.
So just to on the physical deck, I do include some blank cards where a GM can customize their deck. You can put whatever you want to add topics to the deck. It's not for players because if somebody's writing something down, you lose anonymity. But the GMs can customize their deck. And as a backup, there are X cards that can be used still as like, hey, we did that. We did the deck of player safety, but still, if at any time you're uncomfortable, you can still hit the X card.
Right.
But yeah, so the idea of customizing it was a big part. But I don't know, usually with the digital version, we give you, 30 seconds or so and to select whatever topics. And then the GM would then hit lock and reveal. And that will show everybody the cards that were chosen. So again, completely anonymous. We don't know who chose which cards. Everybody's on the same page. So imagine somebody turned in the snakes card.
Right, I'm gonna hit the button and see if we got any any audience participation.
Yeah, let's see if audience participation.
Oh, we got a couple.
Yeah, good.
So we've
got there you go.
Yeah, so we've got alcohol, and every statement must end with the word sexually.
All right, that's my brother. I'm guessing because he would be the one to harass me. I don't know. But in any case, the yeah, let's say somebody turned in snakes, and the fact, why you cover this with all the players is not just for me as the DM,
Hmm.
but also let's say you have a druid who's the player. Again, you're at a convention. I show up with my druid. I turn into a snake. The person across is terrified of snakes. You didn't know it before because they submitted snakes. It's like, hey, Mr. Druid, you can turn into anything else. Just don't turn into a snake. Even a lizard with legs, is
Yeah,
probably fine. Just don't turn into a snake. And that way, that player
doesn't feel
doesn't impact
comfortable.
the other player at the table. And also, there's a couple other things about this. The GM can also preload the deck. I used to play at a GM's table. He did not allow swearing. He had his preteen daughter playing. He's like, no swearing at my table. And he was just upfront about it.
Hmm.
But the swearing card is there. Let's say I'm that GM. I could just select that card myself.
Put
Players
it out
don't know
on the
I'm the one who
list.
put it
Nobody
in.
knows it's you that's doing it, but it does
And I
allow that
can,
opportunity.
yeah, it allows to affect behavior at the table. So the topics cover, in-game things like snakes, animals,
Hmm.
grotesque gore. So game topics, but also player behavior. So like swearing, flirting is the card that gets picked the most. Because nobody really wants to sit down at a table with strangers and be flirted with while they're trying to play a game. So that
Correct.
card, in my experience, gets pulled the most. And frankly, there are a lot of players who also they'll tell me afterwards, like, you know what? I thought I was anything goes, but now that I had a chance to look through the deck, there's actually now that and I have a choice, there are actually some topics I don't want.
Yeah.
So because the alternatives, people I've met GMs and they're like, hey, I'll just give people postcards and they can or index cards, they can write anything they don't
You're
want
never
and
going to think about it
it's
off the
like
top of your
think of it
head.
on the spot. Like what things don't you want?
Yeah.
It's tough to do that. But when you have cues that help you think, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I don't have to have children in, getting hurt in my game because
Right.
I had a 2-year old baby. I would have been fine 2 months ago, but I've got a 2-month old. I don't want to think about kids being
Yeah.
harmed. So people's lives change, circumstances change to where what they're sensitive this week to this week may have, be different than
Yeah.
last week.
So
So
my question with that is do you run this every week with your party?
no, that's actually a great question. So I do not. And it's not designed, like I didn't design it with that in mind. So there's nothing that prevents you from doing that
Right.
because, like you said, week to week,
Things
it
could
could
change.
people's life circumstances can change, or just their mood could change for that week. Now, 2 years with the same players, we're pretty well established as far as
Right.
where we're going. And we did do a session zero, get to know each other in the beginning to make sure we were all on the same
Hmm.
page. So that aspect of it, this was really designed for organized play, like conventions or game stores where you're sitting down with people you don't know,
Right.
and you're just hoping that nothing bad happens. For GMs, the other thing I had this is kind of funny at Gen Con, just past Gen Con, one of the GMs who was an early adopter, the guy who runs Lurking Fears, Matthew McLeod, right away he's like, I want this. It's my quality control. I need something for quality control because he's running a business. He's running games for money.
Yeah.
Okay. He introduced me to another gentleman who is running games for money. It's a different organization. And this guy just goes, oh, I hate safety tools. All I need is some guy at the table saying X carding everything, X card, X card. Like, you get that guy who just wants to keep X.
Wow.
And I said, listen, this is exactly what you need
Yeah.
because by doing it this way, you're avoiding problems in game that
Hmm.
stop your flow. Like, again, if snakes were a problem and somebody X cards you because of snakes, it's like, now you're scrambling. You're trying to figure out how do I adapt? What do I do differently? The game just grinds to a halt.
Right.
Whereas if you can say, oh, no snakes this game, guys, and just play, now your game
Right.
just flows
And
smoothly.
especially on things that you might not think about as triggers, and then you could
Right.
place those either behind your DM screen or you can place them next to you and be like, okay, I need to remember, like, don't talk,
Yeah.
and it also, like you said, it depends on the setting, right? Like, if you are getting ready to play a game in Curse of Strahd, for instance, after this was already made the comment on in chat, there's an entire area where the hags are cooking kids in pies.
Yeah.
Maybe we avoid that mission
Yeah, you
completely.
know what? They're adults in pies now.
They're
I mean,
adults in
it's very
pies,
easy to change things, and
right?
and my website does have so a couple of things about the physical deck. On the back of the box are the GM instructions. So when somebody picks
Right.
up a deck, you scan the QR code. It takes you straight to the website and
Hmm.
says, "This is how you do it. These are the steps." Just like I've explained, very simple. it also has a page where, okay, they drew these cards. What do I do now? So for each card, it's like if you pick snakes, change it to spiders or oozes or undead or
Yeah.
constructs. Recommended things you could exchange out
Hmm.
just because a GM might get thrown off, like, oh no, that was
Yeah.
what do I do? So I'm trying to again unburden the GM by still having something in place.
Right.
Now, if you're playing Temple of the Spider Queen, they should know that before they sit down. Like, don't have somebody pull Spider card and now all of a sudden like your whole story is off.
Yeah.
That needs to be out there up front. But
What that
but
comes
yeah,
down to, like you said, is this should be something you present either right before they're starting the game and they've already heard what the game is called, or especially at a convention. Because at a convention, they could sit down and be like, oh, it's the Tomb of the Spider Queen. You're like, you didn't like spiders. Like, why did you sit down at my table?
yeah,
But they wouldn't most likely in that case. If
exactly.
it's just a bunch of your friends and you're trying to get something started, you're like, hey, let's do this card thing first, and then we can figure out what module or what story we want to tell. Now that I already have I already have my bumpers,
Yeah.
and I can avoid those as need be.
Yeah.
Uh,
And again, those are bumpers for the players as well. They
yeah,
all know how to behave because we've all kind of verbally agreed to it.
right,
And they help keep each other in check. If I slip up and start getting gory, somebody might be like, and it just keeps me on track as well.
right.
In my experience, you have two main situations that arise when using the deck of player safety at a convention. Okay. And they're very easily addressed, in my opinion. So
Right.
the most common thing is the player who says, "Oh, I'm good with anything," and they just were like, "Here, pass it on. Let me pass the deck to the next person. I don't need to pull a card," and they're very verbal about it. That happens the most in terms of challenges. Most people
Hmm.
just get it. They're like, "Okay," but when you get that type of players, like, "I'm good with anything," they can pass it on. Anyway, the simple response to them is, "Look, that's great." But in order to ensure everybody else's anonymity, can you respect the process? Just pull the anything goes card because otherwise,
Right.
you're compromising other players' anonymity. And you usually get this like 2 second, like, oh, okay, I get it. And
Right.
then from then on, they respect the process.
I like it.
On a more extreme example, you may get, the player who's like safety tools are dumb, and I just disagree with it. And frankly, my response to them is like, well, I just found your hot button. Like safety tools are your thing. That really sets you off. Can you understand that somebody else may have something, there may be,
Right.
alcoholism that somebody doesn't want to reveal that they're a recovering alcoholic to strangers. So if they can say, look, no alcohol in the game or at the table, because it kind of applies both ways, it's
Yeah.
like, what a relief to that person who doesn't have to have it sitting around them now,
Yeah.
as and had that voice anonymously. So yeah, but like I said, usually anybody who gives this the milder version of resistance, like, I'm good with it. After you kind of address it once, they're good from then on. It's like
Right. I could see that.
because nobody wants to. Very few people want to be jerks.
Right.
Okay, that's just the fact. So fortunately, people tend to respect it at that point. And my goal, so we saw the digital version here. I've got the physical version. Really, my personal goal is that by having the same mechanic for online games and in-person physical play with the actual physical deck, that this whole acceptance of safety tools just accelerates faster.
Hmm.
Because companies, any convention now, any company running games for organized play, they're all recognizing that the industry expects this. We can be as old school as we want, but the future customers are expecting some sort of mechanism for player safety in their games.
Yeah.
And I had at Gen Con, Cobalt Press went all in. I was able to get in touch with them and pitch it to them a few times. And Alexander, who's their chief operating officer,
I met him at Gary Con. He's an awesome
yeah,
dude.
yeah, I met him a couple of cons at a couple of cons, and we talked about it. And I was at Gary Con. I was literally sitting next to him on the couch in the bar area,
Yep.
and he just turns to me and goes, "I think we're going to order a bunch of decks for our launch." And I was like, "All right." I mean, like I've been pitching it to you, and this is like the first feedback of like, "Yeah, we're
Yeah.
going to do this." So at Gen Con, Gen Con, Cobalt Press bought enough decks to supply for every table there, and they actually mandated their GMs to use them,
Awesome.
so that there was no choice. They said, "This is our safety tool." I went to their GM meeting and I gave,
Hmm. The whole
I'll say
brief.
brief, if anybody believes that. like 10-minute demo, just the verbal instructions and everything so they could go smoothly. Um, and frankly, at Gen Con, so I sport my DECA player safety shirts everywhere I go. When I'm at the cons now, I got a bunch of them. I am my last name probably should just be Tom, the DECA player safety guy, because that's how I'm introduced most of the time at this point. And but I had at least a dozen people just stop me in the hall to Gen Con anywhere, and we're talking 70 some thousand people,
Mm-hmm.
massive place. And I got stopped over and over again by people who had either were players or GMs running games. And they're like, hey, where'd you get that shirt? Or are you that guy? Or I'm like, yeah. And they're just like, thank you so much. That really improved our game, right from the get go. They were really appreciative, which is, it feels good to know that, something is making a difference. Because I'm never going to get rich off of $16 cards that I make in the USA. The margin is not there.
Right.
So I'm keeping my day job, but I'm just passionate about the true difference it can make to make the gaming experience for the players and smoother for the GM going forward. So having the digital version, having the physical version, I really hope pushes that acceptance forward faster. Because it's not, I've been at tables where at a convention where it's like, oh, here we're using the X card, and then later on you sit at another table like, oh, I use red, yellow, green, and or just write something down. It's like, it's what are we using today? And it's really, in my opinion, mostly just checking the box because we use a safety tool that nobody actually employs most of the time because
Mm-hmm.
strangers that you don't want to be open with. But in any case, I don't have to sell you on it, James. You're already convinced.
I am. Truthfully, it's one of those things that I really do enjoy, and I think I love the idea that it's mysterious, or it's hidden from others, so it makes it easier for me to get these tools back to me real fast and go, okay, no clowns, no snakes, no spiders.
Yeah.
I guess we're throwing kobolds and goblins all night. Like this is all I got, but we'll do it.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
the reality is, so as a GM, like anything new as a tool, can scare GMs because
yeah,
they're already worried about running a good game for their players, right? So again, if you're interested in employing it, do a test run, try the online
yeah.
version out. If you want to test the digital version, just word of advice, you would create the GM session, open up another window in incognito mode or whatever browser you're using. Otherwise, it'll know you're the GM and it'll just reopen the same window. So paste the link in a incognito mode browser window. So that way you can see player and GM at the same
Oh,
time if you just
neat.
want to test it out for yourself. But even with the physical deck, just run it with your home group who you're very comfortable with. And like, I just want to practice this once. I guarantee if you practice it once, you'll have it down
Yeah.
because it's not hard,
Yeah. Well, for my
Um,
players that are probably not in here tonight, but my Monday night show that we run on Gen Con is definitely going to get their little flag on this one here this weekend because I need to verify. We did a session zero, and we do about every 4 episodes we do a check in to make sure, hey, is anything uncomfortable? Is anything moving different, wrong? But this is definitely a great opportunity for me to just be like, hey, take this quiz real, or take this real fast, knock this
Mhm.
out, and then that way I can make sure that as we're moving through Icewind Dale specifically, if you don't like slaves, like please let me know. Like that's a big issue for a lot of people, like
Yeah.
slave servitude, things like that.
Yeah.
Barbaric
Human
mentality, marauding, all
trafficking.
that stuff.
The reality
Um,
is, you never know what people have been through.
you don't.
You just don't know.
Yeah.
So I approach it with like just have this much respect that your actions or the action
Yeah.
unintentionally could affect somebody else,
Right.
and it's like that's what this is about.
Yeah.
Just a modicum
We
of
had a
respect.
player at our table. It wasn't them, but their wife had been actually kidnapped and like put in like the back of a trunk before,
Hmm.
and it doesn't just trigger her now; it triggers him. So I'm like,
Right.
okay, throwing people in closets or putting like securing people in other than maybe the mechanic of grappling,
Right.
don't do it if they can't find a way out. And I'm like, okay, cool, got you. Not going to do that to you
Exactly.
at that table. But things like
Actually, the
that.
other thing I was going to say, you mentioned earlier, like spiders got,
Yeah.
whatever. The reality is, when players turn in cards, 9 times out of 10, they don't actually affect your game, your content.
Right.
It's not like, oh, I did have a snake and somebody pulled a snake
Yeah.
card. Like, how many times are you running a giant snake? It's like,
Yeah.
so most of the time, it doesn't even force you to change your game. It
Right.
just may change a little bit of behavior. Like, all right, I won't be as grotesque. I won't be as gory.
Right. Yeah.
I'll tone that down, but it doesn't change my story.
Yeah.
So yeah, but again, everybody leaves, starts the game feeling like, oh, I can relax because I know I've had a voice in this.
Yeah. No,
Um,
and I like that.
I've had some game runners say, we do a survey at the end, or we don't hear of any problems, and it's like, well, I'm, in customer service and I'm in technical service and stuff like that. It's like the worst customer is one who walks away without saying anything.
Yep.
That's the worst case scenario.
I agree.
So, and surveys, yeah, that means something bad already happened, and now you have to act on it as a result. If they complain about it, like head it off in the beginning if you
Right.
can. You can't head everything off, but
Yeah.
try and head it off at the start. And
Preemptive is
everybody,
definitely better than reactive, that's for sure.
exactly. So, yeah.
So, this is the part of the night where I leave it up to the chat. If you have any questions, this is what we call last call.
Oh
So, if you
yeah.
have any questions, place them in the chat. We've got about 10 minutes before I close down the
Yeah.
bar, and it's time for us to close out for the evening.
And before everybody runs off, I do have a discount code to order the physical deck from
Ooh,
my website.
check that out.
At the end, I'm gonna
The
pull.
end.
I'm gonna be that guy. Like, yeah, you gotta wait till the
Gotta
end
wait
for the
till the
discount
end.
code. But it gives you, free shipping effectively on a deck, which
Hey,
shipping's gone up.
shipping has
But
gone up.
yeah.
But yeah,
But
we got
anyway,
the last 10
I'm
minutes.
curious. Go
So
ahead.
we'll see
Yeah,
what
I'm curious to
people
take
we'll see what
questions.
people have to say.
Yeah.
We'll see if there's anybody sitting around that's like, ooh, I have this really interesting question.
Uh,
One question I have though about
sure.
specifically the deck of player safety is: are you making a second one for somebody that's got more of a mature audience?
I have not thought of that yet.
Okay.
Because I'm obviously going at a broad
Yeah.
convention. Most conventions are
Ooh,
pre-ish.
that's a good
Um,
question.
yeah.
We'll get that one next.
So yeah, actually, so yeah, I'm not looking at doing that yet.
Right.
I'm getting lots of positive feedback or just ideas from people like, hey,
Right.
this little thing could help. To be honest, the write-in cards, I was gonna take them out because I felt people always thought it's for the players to write in.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, they're not using them as intended, so maybe I'll just pull them out. But everybody's like, no, we love the writing cards. So I was like, all right, however you're using them, I'll leave them in
Right.
on feedback. So if I do have that feedback, more customized decks for
Yeah.
specific games like Alien or Star Trek,
Mm.
like topics that aren't so much fantasy.
Yeah.
These are fairly generic and could be in anything,
Yeah.
but um, some of the companies want to brand it. I've been approached with some that like, hey, we want our logo on it. And I'm like, I'll do whatever you want. I've
Yeah.
had there was early on there was an organizer named Inroad Ministries who they were like, we want them with our logo, and it wasn't cheap because again, anything you print has to do with volume. So you pay through
Right.
it's low volume, but they're like, I didn't make any money. I did it at cost. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll do it for you just because you want it that badly.
Yeah. That's
Like I
awesome.
said, I'm never going to make much money off of it.
No, I mean, but the concept is very rewarding in its own, which I think is definitely a big deal.
Yeah.
So we've got two questions out there right now. The first one is any plans on making non-tabletop versions for schools or education children?
So not concrete. I'll say that.
Okay.
I met a guy sitting next to me at a bar. I was having dinner, and I think it was Gamma. I got invited to Gamma by Paizo because Paizo's really embraced this. They were
Yeah.
like, we love it. They sell it through their web store now. They
That's
bought it for
awesome.
their. In any case, and they said, come to Gamma. You can sit up in our booth, talk to the retailers, just pitch it. We love it. Okay, so I was sitting at a bar, and there were non-Gamma people there. And for anybody who doesn't know, Gamma is the industry like where publishers and retailers get together. It's not gamers and play. I mean, everybody's a gamer, of course, but it's not like, I'm going to play games and that's the only reason. It's how, let's see all the new products. Let's see what you're releasing so I can buy it for my store and sell it.
Right.
But in any case, so there was a guy next to us, or sitting next to me at the bar, not associated with Gamma. Hey, we got some good ads going now.
No, no.
Are we offline?
So they can't hear us during the ad is the only downfall.
Oh, okay. We gotta wait for it to end.
Yep. We're gonna wait for it to
All
end.
right. I'll take a drink.
All right. The way that they can solve that is they just a quick subscribe, and then they don't get ads no more.
Okay, those who don't
Yeah.
subscribe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those that subscribe.
Hey, and we're back.
Yeah, and we're back.
All right. Sorry for the ad, folks. But in any case, so I was sitting to somebody non-gamer, and I explained to him what I was doing. He's like, "Hey, have you thought about this for like business environments, office environments, whatever?" And then I had a close family friend also out of the blue, like, hey, send me one of your decks. Like, and I was like, why? Like, you weren't, like, what do you have to do with it? And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
something came up at work about our meetings and, how do we control content during the meeting so we stay either on task or I don't, not the details, but
Yeah.
the notion of, is there something beyond gaming for this in today's society, especially in a digital format where people are having so many online meetings and you could just have like these topics are just don't bring them up. They're off the table. This for
Yeah.
this whatever. Um, so I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Tor Iron or whoever added that question. I would love to take it to have more influence, more positive influence in other areas. I'm not affiliated with schools or I don't, so if you have ideas or you want to reach out to me directly with an idea on where the applicability could be, I'd be all ears to try and do something with it.
I have a I
Anybody
have
can
a
contact.
administrator from Denver that I'm sure is going to be interested
Oh,
in this. So
absolutely. I do think there are other uses for it. So maybe I can retire off of cards if I can get it broad enough. That's not the intent. Like I'm
no,
not I early on I thought, well, if Wizards buys it for 20 grand, like the idea, I'm like, yeah, whatever. But to be honest, now that I've met so many people at so many other games, and I would not want this locked behind any single company. Like I
right,
wouldn't, the industry I think needs it, it benefits from it. No single company should control it. So it's like, let's get it out to everybody. And then if there are other applications, then let's do that too.
right. No, I agree, and I like that as well. Yeah. So Torian, I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry if I'm breaking up your name.
I know it's memorable though.
It is. And we'll hopefully see you next week for the next show. But I've also got from the Weather Dragon. So Mike is asking, are you realizing the deck needs to be bigger for more options not originally thought of? And I think we kind of went over that as well.
We did touch on it in the idea that, just to go into some of the details on how did I settle on these topics.
Hmm.
So, kind of various business practices, risk analysis, things like that. I basically, started with Monty Cook's consenting gaming checklist. Like that's kind of the standard for a lot of
Hmm.
home groups. But again, that's something done in advance. It's not anonymous, but it creates a good forum for discussion. And I started with that, and then I also have a literary friend, Ann Kelly, who is a writer, and through her learned about like how literary critics classify content in books. You should check out her book Veil Haven. You can thank me later, Ann, but available on Amazon now. She's one of my players. She's great. But in any case, but with her help, like finding resources on how they classify books, so basically ended up with a long list of topics that or trigger warnings for lack of a better term. I don't like using that because everybody attaches a negative connotation to it. That's why I use
Right.
topics. But in any case, but then I just went through and started running like risk analysis on it. Like,
Okay.
okay, how often do spiders happen in RPGs? Very often. Low, medium, high. So very high. It happens a
Right.
lot. you know, I started with impact because usually when you do risk analysis, like frequency and impact, and then you focus on high frequency,
Hmm.
high impact. But I realized like part of the process is I can't judge the impact because it's
Right. That's
individual,
part of the
especially
idea is that the impact could be very just barely a factor for one person. It could be almost impossibly able to overcome for somebody else. Right.
right. So I just threw that out, and then we focused on frequency, and I did with my players. I run two home groups, who both have helped me out a lot in this to go through topics, weigh frequency, what they thought were good ideas, how to phrase certain things,
Hmm.
that are, maybe phrasing can be dicey, but depending on how you go
Right.
with it. Um, and then basically took the highest, the weights, the ones that we knew, like these are the top 32 to go with. And then I think I literally was in the shower. It was one of those moments. It's like, oh, I'll include some blank cards so people can customize it. Because I was like, yeah, that's you just can't cover it all. And I'll do
Right.
blank cards. They're reusable. If you use wet erase markers, you can erase them and change them over and over again. And it allows the GMs to customize their deck with new topics as they see fit. Because I've
Yeah.
heard of even people brought up to me like, what about like finger? Like, there's a phobia about fingers being separate, which I think everybody would have that phobia. But
Yeah.
like in particular, there can be, again, you
Yeah.
just never know what it is.
Right. Or like the idea of like extrapolating on that idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes sense.
And just to
Um,
answer the Weather Dragon's question a little bit further, so one of the constraints I have, of course, is sticking with something
Size.
standard. So this is a 54 card casino deck. As soon as I say I need 60 cards, well, the price triples because it's some custom order.
Mm,
So that's a factor is I got to stick with what's produced in the industry today,
that makes
just
sense
to keep
now.
it remotely reasonable in terms of costs.
Yeah, but we can make expansion packs.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah.
So add to your pack. Anyway, last one we see here, and I think you've kind of crossed this, but there could be bigger ones. I don't know.
Yeah.
So Inked Grandmaster says, I am unfortunately tuning in late, so my apologies if you have spoken on this, but what are you doing? What you're doing is so awesome and needed. What has been your most fond or rewarding moment so far this time in doing this?
Oh, dude, I'm already starting to cry. Yeah.
I mean, you've got
Um,
Paizo, you've got Cobalt Press, you've got Demiplane, you've got being used at all these conventions. I don't know,
that, but that's great.
but what's the moment? What That's what
It's
I'm waiting on. Is what's the cherry on top moment that caught your like I wouldn't say caught you, but like caught you off guard that worked helped
I'll
this work the
generalize
best.
it because it does get me choked up a little, but
Yeah.
generalize it in the person who approaches and says, "I never knew how much I needed this." Like
Mm.
the option wasn't there, and now that I've used it, man, it really,
Are you saying a game
really,
master that came to you, or somebody who has
oh,
actually been like, I took a card and I didn't realize how much this actually helped my game?
yeah, it's both. Like I said,
Okay.
Gen Con got stopped like a dozen times by
Yeah.
players and GMs. I will say there was the moment, the interaction that made me say I have to do this. So I play tested this with just printing on cardstock, and
Hmm.
it's terrible. You could, it's no secret. Just go to my website and get the 32 words and make your own deck. Problem is, if you're not using casino cards, they stick together. Even the ones on Amazon, I tried various
Yeah.
prototypes. It's like, part of the challenge was doing something quick. So casino cards you can go through real fast, like they're
Right.
real slick. But in any case, I was doing it with my card stock ones, and the moment where I knew I had to do something was I ran a game at my local game store, and all strangers, never seen them before, because I always just pop in there when I don't have a weekly home game. Sometimes I'll just go in, and I'll be, give me all your stragglers who are looking for a seat. I'll run it.
That's
In any
awesome.
case, this guy who was probably about 6'4", 6'6", built like a tight end, just big. And all the players turned in anything goes. And I kind of alluded this to earlier, but he just turned to me. He's like, dude, I really appreciate you doing this. And that was kind of like, I got to do something with this. Like,
Right. The
I'm
dude,
on to
the
something that
biggest
matters.
the biggest brute here is like, I
Yeah,
appreciate this.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. So that was like the moment where I was like, I've got
yeah.
to do something with this.
Yeah,
I
that's
got to
like
make it.
you. That's like you doing this to at Gary Con, and the Big Show walks up to you and he's like, "I actually pulled one of these cards," and you're like, "Oh, really? Like you
Yeah,
did?"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's I'm really happy to get that feedback.
it's
To
awesome.
know it's the type of thing when people try it, that's when they're like, "Oh, this is great."
Right,
And I'm not just saying, I mean, but a lot of hesitation to try something that's a mechanic that's
right.
new, especially right before a game. Like, I got players that I'm trying to run a good game, blah blah. But it's like as soon as they've done it, that's why I appreciate Cobalt Press kind of mandating it.
Mm,
That they took that step, to mandate. It's like it forced them to use it, and then they're like, "Holy cow, this really helped our game," and our players loved it. They did a survey. I'm waiting on the full results. Kobo Press had in their after game survey specifically something to the effect of, "How do you feel the Deca player safety impacted your game?" It was something
ooh,
like that. It was very specific about the deck. It wasn't
right,
did you like the use of safety tools? It wasn't generic. It was
right,
Deca player safety because they're judging like, do we run with this or not? They're busy.
right.
And after the first day of Gen Con, Zach, who runs their organized play,
Yeah,
who's
I know
amazing,
Zach.
he's like, man, I've got like 60 surveys back, and that question is scoring 9.9.
That's
Like,
awesome.
I'm like, and I was hoping to have the rest of his stats for all the Gen Con for today, but he said, yeah, he'll give me all the stats because I want to know how it is and get
Yeah,
in. 'Cause
definitely.
the other thing is, I'm open to any and all feedback. just
Yeah.
because let's make it evolve. Let's make it a little more useful, a little better,
Yeah.
um, in order to, just, better the experience at the table.
No, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad we got a couple questions because it definitely helped, extrapolate on some things that somebody might have wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So, but this is last call. So thank you once again, Tom, for coming on here with Deck of Player Safety. I'm going to post this one more time in the channel
Okay.
because the deckofplayersafety.com is wonderful. But what I want to post real quick is the Demiplane app because this is something you guys can use in your table. And you can use this without having to buy this at all. Not saying that you shouldn't. You should definitely go buy. But you definitely, for online tables and for people that maybe are not in the area, of course, this is a great opportunity and it's free. So definitely use it.
Yeah. Yeah. The online version, the fact that you have to copy a long link, it's not really practical in person.
Right.
So again, the physical deck for in person, that for online is
Yep.
complementary.
Yeah.
Trying to share a long link amongst people is a little tough, but the idea is like once they know the mechanic, it's just second nature to do it.
Right.
I did promise a discount code for those that are left or anybody who watches on YouTube after, hopefully. So the discount code of Tavern, so Tavern, will get you $7 off an order. Typically, that's the price of shipping a single deck.
Yep.
But to avoid the complications of like free shipping on somebody in Germany who orders it, because I do ship internationally, which costs like 20 some bucks. Like that's more than the price of the deck, I know, and I've had people who do get it. But I don't want to absorb that shipping cost to do blanket free shipping. So I figured $7 off, the equivalent of shipping for a single deck in the US.
That's
So
awesome. And thank you very much.
yeah, no, thank you for having me, Jane.
No,
This is
definitely.
it's great to get to know you more.
Thank you.
It's great to have a forum in which to talk about something I'm passionate.
That
And
is
hopefully,
what the tavern has always about, as I tell
yeah, you're
everybody.
doing good things, man. You're
So,
doing good. And shout out to Michael, a Weather Dragon. I know he was on last week, but I met him at GaryCon and we played games together. We drank together. What a great guy.
yeah.
You know.
No, Mike, so found out found out last week when we were talking, is that he's only about an hour from the house. So, we're going to be planning on at least running at least a game here sooner or later together. It'd be great. It's a lot of fun. A bunch of people actually are in the channel right now that are within maybe an hour or 2 hours distance, which is crazy to
Oh,
think that we have this awesome community growing in the East Coast, which is awesome because we need a good convention over here on this side of the water.
right.
I like going to the Midwest. I like going to the south, to the West. Let's get something on the East Coast so I don't have to always travel. Dragon Con's a little too far south, and
Yeah, dude.
back
Next
to
week.
you.
I know.
So
I heard you talk about it last week.
yeah, I won't be there next week,
Good one.
but
It's TT. So real briefly,
yeah.
Dragon Con and Gen Con to me are polar opposites. They're the yin and the yang.
Okay.
Like Con's 90% gaming, if not
Yes.
more, and like 10% cosplay. Dragon Con is 90% cosplay and pop culture and like
Mm-hmm.
10% gaming. So I
Yeah.
usually don't run games or do much gaming. I don't do any gaming at Dragon Con just because there's so much more to experience.
Yeah.
But TTRPGs are growing a lot at Dragon Con. It is becoming a much bigger staple now, in a really good way. And the guys who run the D&D, Mark Buffington, who run Adventures League, do a great job. The Paizo guys do a great job. And I am actually going to run games this year because I was like, I need to shake it up a little bit, just to do a little something different in my Dragon
Well,
Con.
maybe
So
in
I'm gonna run
2025, I'll be
Sunday.
invited down there to run games, and then I'll join. I'll join you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's still voluntary. There's no pay.
Right.
So it
So
helps me out. But if you need a place to stay, let me know.
yeah, we'll do. Real quick, want to shout out a couple things. First, Bird Quest. So if you are on the East Coast, next September 20th, there is a smaller convention right here in Virginia, that is going to be running, and people in the chat room, along with a bunch of us, are going to be there. So come meet myself, the Tavern Keeper. I'll be in full Tavern costume, and go meet Ink GM and a couple of the other guys over there that are professional game masters that do this for a living, and they're incredible. And Mike's going to be there too, I think, from the Weather Dragon. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Second thing, we want to improve the tavern, and we want your help. The first way to do that, of course, we put links now on all the overlays that say Bar Top. Bar Top is a link to our Discord. In our Discord, as we're getting ready to revamp this year for 2025, Our goal is to make this as community driven as possible. So by doing it, there's two ways to do it. First off is go join our Discord so that we can actually get feedback from each and every one of you on how we can get the audience more involved, the people you want to see, things like that. Second thing is Mike really sprung something in me last week that really hit a chord, and that is the rising ships. Well, we don't do ships here; we do glasses. So as a tagline, anybody who's willing to support the Misfits and wants to be a part of this culture of growing everyone at the same time, all I ask is that on all of your social media is that you put hashtag raiseyourglass. And we're going to see who gets involved with this and see how big we can make this grow, because it's going to be a lot of fun, I think. And if we get a big enough of a group, we'll do a raise your glass, show, and it'll be fun. But yeah, that's the two ways you can come hang out with us. From now on, all of our Discord all of our commands will be placed on the actual screen so that you can use those in the chat room itself to get the information. Job board is now where you can get all of our information. Bar top is where you can get our Discord, and then we'll have another couple of them added to give our guest, and then of course our Raise the Glass community member of the week. So hope that helps. Hope we get some more feedback as we continue to grow this show and make it more interactive for our audience, as our audience has been growing tremendously over the last 3 years, and it's been incredible. Next week we've got a new guest, because that's part of my goal, is to get a new guest every week. We're booked out until December, everybody, so it's awesome. New guests every week. And next week is a very humbling group family that I have been hoping to have here, and due to some personal circumstances, they've had no opportunity to do so. But next week we will have the Smoking Barrel Tavern. So we will have Porter and his wife here, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about how they create worlds and how they create characters and what they've done to bring that positivity into this world. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So everybody, raise your glass. This is Last Call. This is Tavern Talks. Thank you, Tom, again for coming over and hanging out with us tonight. And we'll see you guys all next week. If you want to see me Game Master, of course, hop over to Gen Con TV on Monday nights. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.